Just people don't like it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's true. People don't like my opinions. It's fine.
No, they don't. Except for a very small group of Redditors and the anarcho-capitalists.
Right. Yeah.
Oh, it's funny. I was we're gonna kind of completely switch gears today, and we're gonna talk about Ben Burgis' book, "Give Them an Argument: Logic for the Left." He's a democratic socialist and a philosophy professor and stuff. I don't know.
So
I'm
fascism at a college, at a university.
Oh yeah, we don't have to.
Parking.
Well, yeah, no, okay. Well, so yeah, we were talking before because I was trying to go to this place to do a thing really quickly, and I wanted to park there, and it was like 15 minutes before it became free parking, and they wouldn't let me. And this is something I was talking to a guy in his 60s about, how like our generation, the millennial generation and below, we're all so afraid of breaking the rules. And granted, honestly, the security person who was dealing with everything probably, I assume that they're in their 40s or above.
Sure.
Most of the people there are, but generally there's this very sort of like goody two-shoes mentality that we have. And I wonder if it isn't because social media and the internet, you just can't get away with nearly as much of anything.
Right.
And a lot of that's for the better, right? But in little cases like this, where it's like, so I then go get gouged by the paid parking for just going in and doing something for 10 minutes. And so I was just all flustered.
I mean, the parking situation, I feel like that a lot of universities are like this, where it's just, it's an absolute mess. And students and faculty, like it doesn't make sense how much they have to pay for parking. And it's just like, it's a system that doesn't.
Yeah,
I mean,
well, and
I guess it makes sense for the university because they make a lot of money off of it.
Right.
But.
Well, in this, it completely screws like most of the people that work here, and also the parking at the place is independently owned, so it's not owned by any of the institutions. So it's kind of like Chicago. I don't know if you know this, but like all the parking in Chicago, Mayor Daley stupidly sold it to like a company in the UAE or something. Nice. I don't know if it's the UAE, but it's an international. It's overseas, and it's just so now we just get gouged.
Right,
but
it's just
fine.
a nightmare. I bet you can't do anything about it.
Now I'm a democratic socialist after all this.
Is that
universal parking? Universal parking.
Yeah, universal parking. Yeah.
Well, because from the Hoppe and Libertarian standpoint, it's like, well, it's their right, and I guess part of
it's not the mayor's right to sell all the parking to a company. Definitely not.
Yeah, that's true.
That's more the democratic socialists would do that kind of thing.
Well, I doubt the mayor sold it to anybody. It was probably that back before this place was developed, people just bought the land and then held on to it or something. Oh, you're talking about? Oh, sorry, you're talking about Chicago. Yeah, sorry, I went back to this. I'm too focused on my own life right now.
I see. Yeah.
But yeah, I did bring up that example. Yes, you're right. Yeah, no, that's it's whatever, government being stupid. Yeah. I don't know how you doing.
I'm fine. I don't know about this book.
You hated this. Yeah. It's
I don't hate it. No, it's not fair. I don't hate it. It's just like. I don't even have that much to say about it. Yeah,
I kind of agree. At least it's an easy read, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
actually, what I almost feel like is not. It's not the same. It doesn't really fit any of the other types of books we read. And does he have like papers or books that are meant for academia?
Probably. I mean, he's a philosophy
professor. Because this feels like this is like a Barnes and Noble bestseller kind of thing.
Yeah, I think it is. I mean, he has another book, and this is why he was on Rogan. Is he wrote a book about like why the left should stop focusing on canceling comedians. It's kind of like it's not really. It's sort of getting away from all the other points while they're focused on canceling people like Dave Chappelle and Rogan and everybody. It's like you have all these other big news stories about unions going on strike and nobody's covering them, and so yeah, I mean there's that, but yeah, I'm sure I agree. I mean maybe there is a better book that we could read after this, or something with more substance. Not that there wasn't, substance in this, but it was a very easy read, and there wasn't a lot in the first 2 chapters that we read that. But I think there were some principles that we can at least hone in on. If you want me to take the lead, then.
Sure.
Well, first off, I think I know what we're going to call this episode: Libertarian Boyz.
Sure. Yeah.
Because it opens up talking about, he's at some like democratic socialist setting, and then he's talking to this like philosophy graduate student, and she's having to teach logic,
right?
And she hates it. And then he's like, what am I going to become, one of those libertarian boys or something like that, something along those lines. And it's just funny. It's like, are we those libertarian boys, Antushka?
I don't think we talk about logic very much.
We talk about rationality, which I think is basically, logic is like the...
I just think of that as just fractions to me.
Rations.
Yeah.
Yeah, ratios.
Yeah, exactly.
No, I mean, you agree, though. I mean, that was the whole argument that Hoppe was making, and why he's a rationalist. It's like the idea that you start with a principle and then you build off of that with logical argumentation. I mean, so most of the books, the first 2 chapters at least, are sort of just going into like logical fallacies. And I mean, I actually haven't ran into this that much, but maybe it was more in 2018 when the book was written, of just sort of, because again, he's basically trying to give like a way for people on the left to combat people on the right. And I guess in 2018, a lot of people on the right were just saying, oh, look at all these logical fallacies, and the whole, like, I think the other thing was that the left was not logical,
Right.
And I think in some cases that people still feel that way. Do you feel that way?
No, I don't think it is about. I think logic is a tool, and I think that placing or suggesting that one perspective is or isn't logical is not the right way of coming at it. I think that there are people in with any political persuasion who are better at being logical than others.
Right.
I don't know. I think there is a deep divide that we've been seeing. I think the Marcuse-Hoppe divide, I think it was a really good sort of back and forth that we read, because I think it really sums up, at least in my mind, and I think I said it in a previous episode, and the easy way of putting it, the like headline is like God or not God. But I think that there's a deep divide, and it's not that one is more logical than the other. It's that, is there an objective truth outside of us, or are we the makers of objectivity? Can we create heaven, or does heaven exist outside of us, and we are in search of it?
Yeah, and honestly, I think Ben Burgis, from my understanding, is he would actually take the idea that there is an objective truth.
I mean, I think most people do, at least to some degree.
Mm-hmm. Except for Thaddeus
It's sort of
Russell.
hard to operate in the world without, being completely unmoored.
But that's, I think, why so many people, again, we keep talking about Thaddeus Russell these last few episodes, but I think he's a good example of this, where it's like he was, again, riding high, and then he sort of really tried to explain the postmodern view, and I didn't even realize this from listening to some of his episodes before having listened to him really talk about postmodernism, how much he is a postmodernist, and how much Ben Burgis actually isn't, which is interesting, because I feel like, especially with people like Jordan Peterson, he does kind of almost help paint the whole left as if they're all postmoderns.
Jordan Peterson gets postmodernism way wrong, I think.
Right. And because Ben Burgis in this is talking about how they're, so again, he's bringing up a bunch of arguments that have been thrown at the left, and, especially honing in on Ben Shapiro in the second chapter, and talking about some of the trans arguments, and, Ben Shapiro getting into debates about basically trans and whether like sex is biologically determined or if it's a social construct and stuff. And he seems to admit that it is biologically determined, but it's, what was he saying? He was saying that the fallacy basically, and I thought this was actually an interesting point, right? Because I think it's the continuum fallacy, yeah. So ambiguous cases mean that there's no distinction. And yeah, so, here's what he's saying on basically page 17. But before thinking about how age and gender might be different, it's worth acknowledging that there are some similarities between those categories. There is an objective, non-socially constructed fact of the matter that the victim of Shapiro's, quote, destruction was 22 rather than 60, because this is basically, Ben Shapiro asks her, like, are you 60 or are you 22? Trying to get at this idea that, like, age...
This is a 22-year-old talking to Ben Shapiro.
Yes.
She comes up to him to argue about how she, or something, like gender queerness is a reasonable thing. Yeah, and then he asks her, why are you not 60?
Yeah, why are you not 60? So, to head off a possible confusion, the specific words and numbers we happen to use to describe ages are certainly culturally contingent, but the actual property of having existed for a certain amount of time has nothing to do with the particular system that some group of humans happens to use to measure time. Similarly, trans rights advocates can and should concede that there are objective, non-socially constructed facts about biological sex. So, I mean, right there, Thaddeus Russell would, of course, push back, right? Granted, an extreme position exists according to which even sex is a social construct.
I don't think it's so extreme. I think he's overstating or he's understating that. I know that it's common now to be like nobody believes that. I know people who we were taught that in grad school, and we were also taught it's uncontroversial and that that it's accepted in the medical. Like we were taught that it's uncontroversial in basically all of academia, that not just gender, but biological sex is completely culturally determined.
Yeah, and I mean, that's certainly not my...
It's not true.
That hasn't been my experience having...
Of course, it's not. Anyway, and I think it's extreme, but I don't think it's as rare as he's making it seem.
Well, rare and extreme aren't synonyms, right?
I think he's suggesting that not many people think that.
Yeah. Maybe. I don't know. Yeah, because, I mean, it's interesting because it seems to bring up the continuum fallacy as a point actually against the people who are saying that it's a social construct completely. Right. Because the continuum fallacy being, like I said, ambiguous cases means that there's no distinction. So, he brings up the point that, like, his friend who's bald, or you could take me, right, who's balding. Right. At what point would you say that I have hair? And how many hair follicles does it take to say somebody's bald versus somebody has hair, right? Right. But, of course, if you zoom out, groups begin to be distinguishable. Although the hair one's kind of a tricky example because it is, I would say, more continuous than like the intersex examples, at least in the proliferation. Like there's the abundancy rather. But yeah, I think basically what he's getting at though is that with things like this, you should not let people change the frame because he's saying like in this case, age and sex are not the same thing. So don't get caught, that's kind of his, I guess, his advice to people. And he uses the law of identity, right? So no analogy is perfect. If A is like B in every way, then A just is B. Right. And so first, it's far from clear that there's more than one way of using phrases like 22 years old and 60 years old. That's both internally consistent and maps onto any part of what are the ordinary meanings of these phrases. So, yeah, and I thought this was interesting because then he sort of goes into Ben Shapiro's book, basically like how to destroy the right or something. I don't. You never read that, did you? No. Yeah, me neither. I didn't know he wrote that. But it's kind of funny because it's like he has these principles. And so it then seems to me that this book is kind of a response to that then.
Probably.
Ben Shapiro writes in like 2014 this book of like how to destroy the left with logic, essentially. And now Burgis writes in 2018 the counterpunch.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, I agree. I came away feeling like it was hard to get like some central rules that he was trying to lay out.
on that last point, I have a note there because when he's talking about it, no analogy is perfect. He doesn't like Ben Shapiro's analogy of gender to age, and he makes a point that it's gender to age, not sex to age. Which is interesting because I don't know whether Ben Shapiro or the 22-year-old he's talking about feel as if they were talking about gender or sex, or whether there is a distinction between them or whatever. So I'm not sure. So that feels initially maybe unfair in terms of his characterization. But then he goes on to suggest a better analogy having to do with parents and the identity of parents.
Right.
And I don't think that any analogy is good or bad necessarily. It depends on what you're getting at. And this is the crucial bit here that he's... I feel like the parent analogy is also missing crucial elements, but he's trying to make a point. So the parents, adoptive parents or biological parents are analogous to cis or transgendered people. That makes sense as an analogy in one way, but a crucial difference that I think of immediately is adoptive parents are opt-in, and the narrative, at least with trans people, is that's the way they really are, and there's a mismatch. They have the wrong body or something like that. It's kind of a confusing narrative, but there's a big difference there, which might be important depending on the conversation. And then Ben Shapiro is getting at the idea that there are such things as static biological categories
that you can't opt in or out of.
Exactly. Whether you call it 22, whether you call them years, doesn't matter. You are as old as you are, at least according to Ben Shapiro. And then your body is what your body is.
Right.
And so this is where it just feels weak to me, because it's like, not every analogy is perfect, and you just came up with another one that has some good points and some negative points. I don't know.
Well, that's interesting, though. So do you come away reading this more confused? Is that what you're saying?
No, not confused, just bored.
Like, what are we really doing here?
Yeah. Like, okay, you don't like Ben Shapiro's analogy. Yours is only okay also.
Well, what did you think about his point, though, that like a lot of... Because then after this, he goes on to start... He basically says what Ben Shapiro's rules for debating are. Yep. And he's kind of so I think it is kind of interesting to I'll just say them, and then I'll say the point that I'm getting at. One is walk towards the fire.
Yeah. Stop before you get there.
You have to take the punch. You have to brush it off. You have to be willing to take the punch. Number 2, hit first.
Sure.
Number 3, my God. My God.
Frame your opponent.
Frame. Oh, yeah. No, that's number 4. Frame the argument.
No, frame your opponent, number 3.
Oh, and then number 4 is frame the argument.
Yes.
Yes, I see that. Frame your opponent, which is always characterize conservatives as being horrible bigots. Shapiro says that leftists always characterize conservatives as horrible
So you have
bigots.
to characterize them as untrustworthy liars.
Yes, exactly. What a great world we live in. Number 4, frame the argument, and then number 6, because he skips number 5. Well, number 5, spot inconsistencies in the left's arguments. Number 6, force leftists to answer questions. Number 7, do not get distracted. Number 8, do not have to defend people on your side. or you do not have to defend people on your side. Number 9, if you don't know something, admit it. Number 10, let the other side have meaningless victories. And number 11, body language matters. So these last, basically, what is it, 6, 5? These last 5, and then, even some of the first 4, Ben points out, are largely rhetorical. Like, it's not really about getting at truth. It's about, this is how you win an argument with good rhetoric, like good body language, and, making sure that you don't get distracted and stuff like that. And if you don't know something, admit it, right? But, that's a little bit more, I would say, getting at truth. But yeah, a lot of these are sort of rhetorical. So, I mean, what do you think about that idea, though, that he's basically, it sounds like he's getting at this point that I do agree with, that a lot of the debates that we will watch online, nobody's really getting anywhere at truth. And he makes this other point that rarely changes their mind on air. It's going to be after probably many years of rumination, especially if you have a career that depends upon the points that you're making. Like, what do you think about that idea? Like,
I think that's all true, but I think he's feeding into it. I think going back a couple pages, he makes an interesting point.
He definitely feeds into it. Yeah.
Which when I watched, or when I listened to Walter Block on his show, they were talking about this. Because Walter Block said to him, "My purpose in this conversation is to convince you, Ben Burgis, of libertarianism.
Right.
I don't care about the audience." And then Ben Burgis says, "No, the purpose in the conversation is swaying listeners." And that's kind of, to me, when I'm reading these Ben Shapiro things, it's all a rhetorical game. He's putting on a show.
Right.
It doesn't matter about the person you're talking to. And this is the thing. It's like, it's an individualistic perspective, the libertarian perspective, the Walter Block perspective, versus an idealistic perspective of, these sort of vague ideologies battling each other, but the people are removed. And I see that in Ben Shapiro too. I'm no Ben Shapiro fan. I think that Ben Shapiro is doing something similar, obviously, and I think that plenty of Ben Burgis's critiques of him are reasonable. But Ben Burgis even writes it in here when he's talking about, arguing with your racist uncle. And he said the purpose in arguing with your racist uncle, calling him out at the dinner table and all that, isn't to convince him, because that's going to be nearly impossible or something. It's to convince and persuade observers. And to me, this is, talk about bad faith communicating.
I was just
You're
about to say
talking to
that
somebody,
and saying
your
racist.
Purpose isn't even to communicate to them.
Well, and you've also already because like when he brought that up, the uncle example was like talking to your racist uncle about immigration. It's like to paint them as immediately racist because they have an opinion about immigration. It's like I keep seeing Nas keeps coming up on my feed on Twitter because he keeps talking about how bad immigration is. I guess, is he just a horrible racist now by Ben's perspective?
I don't know. I have no idea. But exactly.
To your point that it's bad faith arguing, and it feels like that kind of like the point game, right?
There's an interesting maybe it was John Cleese. I don't remember if it's John Cleese or not. I just kind of think it was. It was an interview where they were talking about, this was before live streaming was a big thing, but recording it. No, it wasn't John Cleese. It was Louis C.K. That's a funny thing to mix them up. It was Louis C.K. on Joe Rogan, and they were talking about recording specials. And Louis C.K. was talking about how much he hated recording specials and how he had to record it over and over again so he forgot that they were recording because, first and foremost, he's dealing with a room of, 400 people or 1,000 people who have paid tickets to see him. So if in his mind, he's thinking about future listeners who aren't even there, he was saying he considers that even immoral. It's an ethical issue for him that actually who he needs to be addressing and entertaining and all this is the people there with him in the room. And I think about this every week when I'm doing mixing for a live stream, because it's true. I can't properly mix for in the house if I'm focusing on the live stream. But in this weird way, the live stream takes precedence because it's harder. And that's kind of a blown out version of what I'm thinking about here. Is if you're arguing with somebody, your responsibility is to communicate with them. And if you're considering some sort of other audience, some third party, there's something wrong with that to me.
Is that why you always give me your full attention? I get lost in your eyes, Antushka. Well, actually, though, I'm a little bit serious. So, do you feel like? I mean, obviously, it's not like we have a huge listenership, but so it's not like by thinking about the people listening. But I mean, do you try to do that when we're talking? Then I mean, because it's the same thing. Is like,
I'm not thinking about the audience while we're doing it. It's the same thing as while you're performing. You have to be in the moment. Like, the time to think about your audience is in preparation or in post-production. While you're doing it, you just have to execute it as best as you can.
Yeah. And this gets back to the consciousness stuff, of course.
Right, you have to be unconscious while you're doing it.
Exactly. Yeah. That's the consciousness bell, by the way.
Hit the consciousness bell.
Or the consciousness telephone.
Oh, man. We need drop-in sound effects.
I know. Yeah. So I agree. They're sort of both playing into this like gotcha game, and I think Ben's point at the end actually is kind of that, because it's he goes in this whole thing about the facts don't care about your feelings slogan that Shapiro came up with, and he I think basically is trying to, the overall arc of chapter 2 is how I would say both sides kind of make that claim in a sense, and when both sides in fact are falling into the Humean trap, because he brings up Hume's law, which is basically
is
that when what we mean when we say that people have no, sorry, that's not it. Oh yeah, okay. So Hume's law tells us that a purely descriptive premise, i.e. a premise about relevant non-moral facts, can never give you a good reason to accept a normative conclusion, e.g., a conclusion about what someone should do or about what actions are right or wrong or what policies are just or unjust, unless the descriptive premise is combined with an explicit or implicit normative premise. So I guess it's basically saying if you're going to have a normative conclusion or a moral conclusion, then you have to have a moral premise.
Right. The way that the atheist circuit says it all the time, you cannot get an ought from an is.
Right. Yes, and I think that's how actually Hume actually described it in the quote at the beginning. I guess we can read. Yeah, Hume's actual quote is, "The author proceeds for some time in the ordinary way of reasoning and establishes that the being of a god or makes observations concerning human affairs, when of a sudden I am surprised to find that the author has switched from speaking of is and is not to speaking of ought and ought not, even though it seems altogether impossible that claims about what ought to be can be a deduction from claims about what is, which are of an entirely different kind." So I think I kind of get at it, but I guess you could say the same though is then if you have the flip side is if you have a fact as the conclusion, then you have to have a fact as the premise.
Sure.
And I guess this is, I don't know though. I mean, I don't know.
What do you mean?
I do know. And then, so basically, I think what he's saying then is Shapiro is making this claim. He's making all of these claims as if they're factual, as if they have factual conclusions, when in fact he's having moral premises.
Right. Sure.
Yeah. About what's right and wrong and whatnot.
I'm sure he's correct about that. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's his point, is that and he's also saying that, though, I think in a very ingenuous way at the end, that the left also does this. And I actually liked the last paragraph of chapter 2 because again, I felt like it was. Well, I'm a big fan of self-deprecation. And so he says, to the extent that Shapiro's point is that it's important to get the factual premises of moral and political arguments right, I agree. And I wish he would do a better job of acting on his own advice. To the extent that what he's saying is that leftists can't reason our way to our policy preferences by extrapolation from unmixed factual premises, this too is correct. Unmixed factual premises. Maybe we could talk about that. To the extent, however, that his implied point is that this is a difference between the left and the right, he's full of, now you have to say this.
I can't. It's too harsh of a word for me.
I know, for our delicate sensibilities.
Right. Yeah. I don't know. Yeah.
You hate this.
I don't hate it. It's just it can go so much deep. To me, we're stuck skating around the surface, and it's like he's not wrong. It's just this thing. It's what is quite difficult though is what are things that are able to be factual, because this is the bedrock argument. This is the thing. This is the argument of the why are you not 60? There's a bedrock disagreement about what things can be factual.
Well, I think that we shouldn't actually give up on this because I think, first off, it's the first 2 chapters, right?
Right.
And
I don't think we should give up on it. I was just wondering if he had.
I'm sure he does. Yeah, I mean, he's an academic.
Less kind of pop writing.
Yeah, he's an academic, so he's going to have published. And certainly, his thesis is going to be very, But the next chapters are libertarianism and logical fallacies,
right?
And then A is A, Ayn Rand, Leon Trotsky, and what logic isn't. So I mean, maybe he is going to get at some of that of like what is truth and what isn't truth. I don't know though. I mean, I don't know if he's going to get to that. And I agree. I think that the purpose of this book is probably not to get into quite as much depth as like Hoppe and Marcuse did.
Well, I just notice in the dichotomies he sets up, like the parent example, or he was talking about, let's see if I can find it, something about, the framing of an argument, when he's talking about how Ben Shapiro doesn't want to frame the idea of same-sex marriage around tolerance or justice or anything like that. He wants to change it to framing how will legalizing same-sex marriage strengthen marriage or something like that. And I think it's a fair point. I think that any argument is going to have to be framed somehow, which is a difficult problem. And there's always going to be probably, fallacies all the way through the framing, which is an issue. But none of this has to do with anything factual, because if you talk about tolerance and social justice, these are concepts that aren't, I don't even see how they can be factual concepts.
Well, that is probably a different book, because it sounds like you're wanting him to explain why he believes like democratic socialism is grounded in facts, right? I guess it's there's a lot of assumptions baked into his, and maybe I'm just after reading Marcuse and Hoppe, it's like they go through a lot of stuff. But this, I mean, it is exactly what it's advertised as. So you should blame me if anything, because I was the one that suggested we read this. I
guess I'm just not buying that he has any facts behind him either.
Yeah. Well, let's get him on the podcast. we just can't.
When I say any facts, I'm sure that when I've listened to him, he knows. He's studied a good amount of history, but so has Ben Shapiro. It's not like these people are dumb.
But I mean, to that point, he brings up a fact when he's talking about reframing marriage, which I thought was a very good one, saying like, well, they had to reframe marriage when you had it illegal to do interracial marriage, right? You had to change the law, so that was changing it. So by Ben's definition, he's saying if we're not allowed to change the definition of marriage over time, then conceivably we still wouldn't have interracial marriage, and that's obviously bad. So, it's like I think
but
it's
Ben's
obviously
redefining the way that he has him redefine it. Why marriage should be redefined and how this will strengthen.
You're talking
no,
about?
No, sorry.
Which Ben?
So Ben Burgis talks about a framing. Seemingly, Ben Burgis is saying this is a better framing. That's kind of the implication, is whether or not a same-sex marriage system is just or tolerant versus an unjust or intolerant system. So those seem to be important ways of, investigating whether something is worth doing, whether it's just or tolerant. And then Ben Shapiro says, no, don't talk about it that way. Reframe it as why should you redefine marriage and how will this strengthen the institution? I would say that Ben Shapiro's framing is significantly more open-ended, other than it's forcing you to talk about how it will strengthen it, and perhaps you don't wish to strengthen it, or perhaps the idea of strengthening it is meaningless to you, or something like that. I just don't see. I don't see any problem there. I guess you're gonna have to frame a discussion somehow, and a framing issue is something I notice on Reddit when I do post. Is people are constantly trying to shift the framework of how I'm describing things.
Because they've read this book.
It's really annoying.
Ben Shapiro's book.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. But it's a good tactic because it's easy to drag people around and get you arguing about something that you weren't even trying to argue about in the first place. Mm-hmm. But I don't know. I guess what is Ben Burgis's? Is he saying always accept the original frame and argue with somebody within their frame? Because there's also times that you shouldn't do that as well. Because sometimes people, there's the classic, when did you stop beating your wife?
Yeah, I mean, my. Do you want to finish that?
What? No. But it's like that framing in and of itself is going to present a problem to you if you're trying to communicate.
Yeah. I mean, my understanding is that he's not saying that he's more trying to make people aware of these tactics, first off. I think that's the central thing.
Yeah, that's fair.
And so I don't think he's necessarily saying it's bad to change the frame, especially if you feel like you need to. Mm-hmm. But in this case, I think that I got the impression he was getting at that the fundamental premise of redefining it, or of not wanting to redefine it, was.
Yeah, I guess. I mean,
stupid.
So when he goes on to the 67 court ruling, to me, it's I read in him just the most annoying thing that I hear like CNN anchors and stuff do.
Sure, no, get it out. Get it out.
Somebody asks a question. And then you respond with some annoying other question, because somebody says, "Well, what do you think about, U.S. invasion of Iraq?" And they go like, "Yeah, well, what do you think about Iraq's treatment of women?" or something like that.
Right.
And it's like,
well, and yeah, I mean, and this was what Shapiro did to that college student, right? Well, why aren't you 20? Why aren't you 60? Right?
Well, I don't think so. I think that I think that Ben Shapiro was attempting to address what that college student was approaching him with.
You don't think that this is trying to show that there's an analogy here between redefining marriage for race and then same-sex?
Well, no, because that person was saying that, if I remember the clip, I've seen it a few times, that gender queer, not everybody is a man or a woman. There's such a thing as a non-binary person or something like that. And then Ben Shapiro doesn't seem like he's reframing that. It seems like he's trying to explain through analogy how that is not true.
Well, and how is that not what Ben's doing?
Because what Ben Burgis is doing here is to show how Ben Shapiro's framing is not useful.
What's the difference between useful and true?
Well, If you talk to Jordan Peterson, nothing. But I think it's an entirely different. It's a different section of the chapter. But I think he's saying that Ben Shapiro is trying to create a framing that has assumptions built into it, and those assumptions are not reasonable. Mm-hmm. Versus Ben Shapiro is making a claim that is not true.
Yeah. I mean, now I'm getting pedantic, because then I would say, well, the assumptions being unreasonable lead me to believe that it's not true, according to Ben.
But Ben Shapiro hasn't made a claim. The difference is one is refuting a claim. There are non-binary people. No, there aren't. Here's how you can understand what I mean by that.
That is a claim.
Yeah. Yes. But the framing, there is no claim. Ben Shapiro says, why should marriage be redefined, and how will this strengthen the institution? There's those two questions. There's no claim there.
Well, the claim
Ben Shapiro is asking you to make claims, or asking whoever he's talking.
He's making a claim that marriage is defined between a man and a woman. That's the implicit claim, isn't it?
Well, I mean, there are implied. Every question will have implied claims in it, but I don't think that I don't think that if the argument is all historical stuff, but if the argument is should same-sex marriage be legal, then yes, there is an implied claim that you could make that same-sex marriage is illegal, but maybe not. Maybe it is legal, and we're asking should it remain legal or something like that.
My point is that to me it feels like it is the same thing. And by the way, I'm not saying
I don't think
that
a question and a claim are the same. I guess I disagree fundamentally that a question and a claim are equal.
No, but I'm saying that in both of those examples that you gave, they're asking questions with
Who's
a
asking
question.
Questions?
Ben is asking a question to a question, and the CNN anchor or whatever is asking a question to a question.
Ben's asking a question to a claim in the 22-year-old. The 22-year-old says there are non-binary people.
Oh, okay. Yes. Okay, and the CNN... okay, all right, sorry, I'm being stupid then. Yes, all right, I apologize. Well, I got to just cut this. We just wasted 10 minutes of everybody's life. Sorry. See, now I'm just arguing for the sake of arguing. Well, and so... yeah, no, and of course, yes, I agree that claims and questions are different.
But I think you're right. Most questions you can derive a priori claim, like a priori to the question claims.
Well, and okay, so, well, yeah, maybe I should look at that video, because my assumption is that college student.
Oh, you haven't seen it?
No, I mean,
okay.
I always hate those videos that are like, so and so destroys so and so. I tried to just avoid those and I never honestly found the Ben Shapiro destroys college student videos that entertaining, because I was like, okay, well, so he's going and debating college students. It's like, okay, so what? But my assumption would be that she would be asking a question because it's a Q&A point. But you're right. A lot of people use those to basically do soliloquies and whatnot. So what? I guess there's a few things. I mean, yeah, I agree. There's not that much left to sort of churn over here. He lays out some of the definitions of the logical fallacies in the beginning, which I thought was kind of interesting. But I found it very funny. I think
he got those wrong too.
Oh yeah, well, I guess I take him at his word because he taught logic, as he says.
It's just how so a couple of things. So he starts off pretty early in the first chapter, which I like. He defines logic, and he says logic is the study of the ways in which the premises of arguments can support their conclusions.
Yeah, so you don't agree with that?
No. I think that's I agree with that. I
We're
like
in trouble
that
if you don't.
I like that it's focusing on the premise, and it's studying a mode, or it's studying a way. Mm-hmm. It's so that's interesting. But then he goes on to talk about two major fallacies: the argument from authority and ad hominem fallacies, which are kind of opposite sides of the same coin, which I agree. But he seems to be suggesting that the argument from authority is partially wrong because of the expertise of the person speaking. I'm trying to find my note on it. Where does it start? Sorry, I should have.
It's okay. As long as you're sorry.
I'm so. Where does it start? Okay, all right. So the appeal to authority fallacy is committed when impressive person P endorses conclusion C, is treated as a reason to believe C, despite the fact that P's impressiveness gives no special expertise on anything relevant to C. His example, Einstein was a leftist, wrote an argument about socialism. It's not logical. It's fallacious to consider socialism to be true because Einstein, such an impressive person, wrote about socialists, wrote about how good socialism was, or something like that. Mm-hmm. But there's a key part in there about having no special knowledge about it. Even if you have special knowledge about something, it goes further than that. Something is not true because somebody, including somebody with special knowledge about that topic, says so. Like if Einstein says that the speed of light is a constant, it
or
isn't
the ether
true.
Doesn't exist,
right? But these things aren't true because Einstein said them, and Einstein saying them, no matter how specialized his expertise is, has nothing to do with why they're true. That doesn't mean that it isn't reasonable to listen to people who have expertise, but it's not true because they have expertise. And it's a key distinction that I think is crucial. And I see this in the way that Ben Burgis talks about things. I feel, and it's not just him. The idea of experts today has really taken hold in a very strange way.
Well, I think the idea of experts is being demolished.
Sure.
Like nobody. I mean, and this was. Yeah. I don't know if we should even talk about it, but what's that guy, Terrence Howard?
I don't know.
Okay, it's a whole thing. He's the 1 × 1 = 2 guy that was on Rogan a few months ago. He's an actor.
1 × 1 = 2, nice.
Yeah, and because he's got this, he has no formal training in math. He's an actor, he's
He's just saying silly stuff.
And then so he just was on again with Eric Weinstein.
Okay.
And Eric Weinstein, of course, has a degree in mathematics.
Yeah,
from MIT
he's got 1 × 1 down.
He's got it down. But, he was making, I think, a very interesting point. And don't get me wrong. I mean, Weinstein's got certainly a chip on his shoulder because it's clear that he feels spurned by the scientific community.
Sure, yeah.
For, reasons I don't completely understand, but I'm not saying are invalid. And I can understand why. But he made a good point, I think, that we are in a society right now where people aren't really trusting experts. So I think it's actually very telling that you hone in on this specific thing, because it's like you're kind of saying the expertise of the person doesn't matter. I mean, you are saying, right, the expertise of the person shouldn't actually factor into the argument.
It matters whether or not you should listen to them. Because when we think, when we're engaging,
whether it's true or not,
when we're engaging with people, we have to make calls about whether or not somebody seems credible. But that has nothing to do with like a system of logical fallacies. And it's what I was saying. The speed of light is either a constant or it's not, or something. I mean, it's a crazy example. I should use a simpler example. But
come on.
I don't know. Like a fact is either true or it's not. and whether somebody says that has no bearing on whether or not it is. So somebody can say taxation will create wealth, and either it will or it won't, and it doesn't matter who said it or why they said it or anything like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think I agree with you, but I'm starting to think about that a little bit because I wonder how much authority does matter, though, in when we take things. Maybe we should read the Kuhn book.
I think it matters a lot for how we take it.
Well, no, but also of how facts are aggregated and what because like that's the whole thing is the scientific process is an aggregation of observations, but these observations are all through authorities within the field, which is one of the ways that science becomes so slow because it gets bogged down by ego and whatnot. But ultimately, the person that is the person and the aggregate of people that are making the claims about the facts do seem to matter to us.
They matter
in telling whether it's true or not.
They matter in us believing it. But I don't know. There is a position that some people might hold, but if a doctor says you don't have cancer and you do, the doctor is wrong. The doctor can be wrong. In the system where it matters who they are, at a certain point then, the top dog just can't be wrong. And the king says no, you don't have cancer.
Right.
And whether or not you do or you don't, you don't.
Right. And this gets back to your point of how you are on the sort of philosophical side, that there are objective truths outside of the person.
I think so, yes.
Yeah, which then I completely agree with what you're saying. And I think I'm also on that side too, by the way. Okay.
However, I would prefer to ask a doctor if I have cancer than a carpenter.
Right. What if the carpenter is Jesus?
I shouldn't have picked carpet. I'm picking bad examples today, man. As I was saying, the speed of light is a constant or it's not. I'm starting to think probably there's some weird thing. It's both a constant and it's not.
Right.
It's get away from all that
thing
stuff.
Is it's like there's a ton of things. I never listened to the Terrence Howard. I didn't listen to the Terrence Howard episode. I just saw everybody else talking about it when it was out. It was out 2 months ago or something. And I only listened to an hour. It was a 4-hour podcast. I only listened an hour of the Weinstein one that recently came out. And I mean, I'm all for unorthodox opinions and ideas and stuff because I do think it's useful to entertain them. But and this was one of the things I liked about it is that he was bringing up the ether experiments in the 19th century. And I've even talked to one of the physicists that I know personally, who, respected, got his undergrad in physics at Princeton. Nice. And, it was all the right places, right? Mm-hmm. Who I remember kind of being struck where I brought up remember how people used to think about the ether? He's like, well, the ether is kind of an interesting thing. It's it's not as clear as people think, right? There are still people who wonder about the veracity of that experiment, despite the fact that all of quantum physics is essentially built upon the fact that there isn't an ether.
Right.
So and in that case, the fact that Einstein's telling you that is giving you more credence to believe that. Mm-hmm. But as terms of what's true, I mean, in this sense, I agree. It's really what's going to tell us whether it's true is more experiments, I guess, to be done.
Right.
Did you ever listen to Chapo's Trap House?
No, I didn't. I've never heard of it even until this.
Oh, really? Okay.
I heard of it when you texted me. But.
Oh, okay. Oh, you did read the text.
I saw it.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, but you didn't listen to that other one then, I assume. Did you ever listen to that other podcast?
Mm-mm.
Because that's the one I listened to, Chapo's Trap House. One of the members,
other one that you don't want to talk about.
I can't say the name. You could say the name.
I can say that. Make me say all your crummy words for you.
It's true. Yeah. No, but okay, yeah, but I thought that was funny. But I never listened to it, and I kind of understand why I didn't, because I really don't like this, hey, we're the bad boy, leftist, social democrat stuff either. It's it's as annoying to me as like, hey, oh, we're the bad boy libertarian. You know, it's like it's just as annoying.
Silly.
Yeah. Although we are the bad boy libertarians, right?
Are we?
You're the bad boy anarcho-capitalist.
Yeah, I don't think I'm a libertarian.
Well, you know, it's interesting. It seems to me that anarcho-capitalists are a form of libertarian.
It's true.
Yeah.
So one thing that Thaddeus Russell said once that I thought was important is just not being willing to label yourself that way.
Yeah.
Because you automatically give people tons of ammunition against you just by calling yourself a libertarian or a anarcho-capitalist or a Marxist or anything.
Mm-hmm. You're an Antushka capitalist.
You're giving somebody a framework to understand everything you say rather than forcing them to listen to you.
Yeah, it's true. Because, I mean, even honestly, again, reading Burgis and listening to him talk and stuff, he is, don't get me wrong, he's definitely a democratic socialist, as he says he is. And he even says in here that he's a Marxist.
Yeah.
But he is certainly not the typical Marxist that I would think. Because, again, like, he's got these opinions, I think, that are kind of heterodox on, like, trans people and stuff. And saying that, like, there is some objective truth to sex and stuff like that.
Right.
Or rather, there's a biological basis to it. Which, I wonder if that gets him in trouble now. Because, I mean, it's become even more of a red-hot issue now than it was even just 6 years ago. Although I guess it was becoming to really be that. Had you heard of any of those people that they talk about? They talked about, he talked about this one YouTuber, or these two YouTubers. One's a trans woman, and then this
I didn't.
Libertarian guy. I looked them up. It's interesting. What were it's like ContraPoints, I think.
Yeah.
And then the other one was, I don't remember the guy's name, but I looked him up. The Libertarian dude is doing much worse in terms of views. Yeah, I mean, I went, that ContraPoints woman has like millions of views on her videos.
Nice.
Not as many as us, but yeah.
We don't have video, so.
It's true.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I feel like I had one more thing I wanted to say. You're just itching to go. I can see it.
I'm not itching to go. I'm looking to see if I had other notes.
Yeah. How you feeling about last episode? I thought it was good.
I think it's fine.
It wasn't nearly as bad as I thought listening back to it.
Yeah.
And mostly just because you were like, you were being funnily hyperbolic.
Was I?
Well, you were like, oh, this might get this canceled. It'd be the end of the podcast. But
yeah.
But you sort of clarified what you were saying.
Sort of. Yeah.
During Pride Month, no doubt.
Yeah.
No.
Right. Yeah.
Cool. So you got a show tomorrow?
Oh yeah, I do. I have a show tomorrow.
Wow.
For all the listeners who've made it this far. Well, what's the listenership like?
It's because you. Oh, I was. Yeah. Well, you haven't been posting, so it's
Is that 2?
What's that? No, it's more than 2.
Okay, good.
But yeah, I mean, it has gone back down. The Reddit definitely helps.
It's annoying that you don't get any lift,
Well, I think
we don't have anyone sticking around.
I think we do. We do. But yeah, I am thinking if I should start taking over the video stuff.
What do you mean the video stuff?
Like if maybe I should start uploading the YouTube videos. Just because no offense, I'll be more consistent with it. Because you didn't upload this last week's, right?
Oh, didn't I? Oh. Okay,
no.
Yeah.
It's okay. That's what I'm saying is because I'm not doing any of the Reddit posts,
right.
Let me do all that stuff. And then,
right.
Especially, you don't have to do it every week, but it definitely, to me, it is more work to do the Reddit stuff. So I'm happy to
right.
share the load on that end.
Okay.
And then I can also do the clips too. I'll just maybe want you to show me what you do.
Okay.
But I assume it's pretty straightforward.
It's easy. I think we should come up with a new...
yeah, maybe I'll do that.
A new template.
Okay.
So it looks a little... I feel like it looks kind of like 2007 or something.
I kind of like that, though. I don't know if maybe I'm just used to it now.
Yeah.
Because that's the thing, is one thing I actually don't want to do, but this is obviously the way that you get listeners and everything is... there's definitely certain things that YouTube has selected for, or maybe people have selected for it, that you see all the popular YouTube channels doing. Mm-hmm. Like you have people you just have their face in the thumbnail, and then it's just outlined, and it's very cartoonish and stuff like that. And obviously we're not going to do that kind of stuff, but I kind of like the fact that we're completely different.
Just very unappealing.
Exactly. I mean,
looks old-fashioned. Looks like probably 48-year-olds are making it.
Well, yeah. Well, but you have to understand. I mean, everything has a wave and a trough, and at some point, people are going to get tired of that YouTube style, and I think people are going to want to harken back to the 2000s.
True, but I think they want video. I feel like it's this thing. It would be better.
Yeah, sure. Well, if you want to edit the video,
yeah. No, I mean it's okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, all right.
You were the one that were saying how you wanted to do audio only.
I like the idea of audio only, but I think once we're putting it on YouTube, audio only on YouTube is a little goofy. All right, so next week we're doing Ayn Rand, and what's the other one? Oh, Libertarians.
Yeah, 3 and 4 basically.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. You're excited. I can see it. I can see it. Yeah, but you're going to Matt. So are you flying in tomorrow then? Mm-hmm. Or are you flying tonight? Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Tomorrow morning, get in, play a show.
How long are you there for?
Till Sunday.
Okay. And is this like vacation too, or?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yes.
Taking the kid on the plane.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
She's been on a plane before, though, right?
Yeah. She's been on 8 planes before.
Wow. It's almost more than me. No. Just kidding.
Yeah. Cool.
Just kidding. All right, cool.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Sweet. See you.